Muse Score 4 is out. This is the latest version of the program. The designers have made changes to it that are different from the previous versions made before 2022. Do an online search for Muse Score 4 download. And click on Muse Score 4 is out now. On the screen we see some download instructions and an info video. Leave the video for later. Click on the download link. On the menu we see different versions including Windows and Mac. For this computer we pick the Windows version. Wait a minute for the download to complete. The first program we see is Muse Hub. Open it and we find 3 programs we can install including Muse Score 4, Audacity and StaffPad. We can also install plugins for other sounds like choir, woodwind, brass, orchestral strings, etc. Install Muse Score 4 for now and open it. The first time we see the Getting Started screen. The Watch Video button will open the intro video on YouTube. Next. This is the Scores menu. We see New for creating a new score. Any piece we opened previously will also show up. Open a Beethoven piece. The prompt says it was saved with an earlier version of Muse Score. We see some formatting options and the Watch Video button again. Just open it. We see a familiar layout and many differences. Starting from the top, the pull-down menu options are similar except for diagnostic. The menus under it shows different Muse Score settings, which is not important for creating a score, so we ignore them for now. Under the top panel we find 3 tabs: Home, Score, and Publish. Click on Home and we see the Score selection menu. On the left is My Account. At the bottom we see the button Sign in and Create New Account. People who have been using Muse Score for a while would know if you have a Muse Score account you can access their online library of scores. Under Scores we find Plugins. Here we see a number of plugins in rounded rectangles. Scroll down to see the rest of them. Each can be set to enable or disable. On the top right we see Category All. Under it we see Color Notes, Composing/Arranging Tools, and Playback. We can limit the menu to display only the plugins in a specific category or all of them. We leave the plugins for another day. The last option on the left is Learn. Click on any of these will open an info video on YouTube. You can watch them at your convenience. The tab on the right is Publish. Here the score is locked. We can click on individual notes and do a playback but can't make changes. There are 3 options on top. The first is Print, which is getting a paper copy. The second is Publish to musescore.com. This is for uploading the music to the Muse Score library. You need to log in to your account first. The last is Export. It's the same as Export under File on the top left. Here you see different options. On the left you find a list of instruments. Here we only have piano. You can pick and choose the ones you want to export. On the right you see other options including each part to a separate file and all parts combined in one file, which is something handy to have. Under Format we see PDF on top. You can choose various image, sound, and score formats. What you don't find in earlier versions of Muse Score is Braille for the blind. Close the menu. Go back to Score. There are 3 tabs on the left starting with Palettes, Instruments, and Properties. Here you can display up to 4 different tabs including Selection Filter. You find these under View. In an older version of Muse Score you'd see the Inspector panel on the right. In this version the Properties panel replaces the Inspector. Click on each tab and we see 3 dots on the right. Click on the dots, we see a list of options. We can unlock a menu and move it to a different spot on the screen or close it. We won't go through all the menu options in this tutorial. Top center we see two buttons, parts and mixer. Here we have a piano score, so when we open parts we only see piano. When we have a score with two or more instruments, we can choose individual instrument parts to display. Open mixer and we see a volume panel for each instrument. Here we see only piano. When we have different instruments, we can make each louder or softer to get the ideal effect. On the right is a metronome and a master volume. In this version the rewind and play buttons are further to the right. When we do a playback, we can change the volume for each instrument or the master volume to make the overall sound louder or softer. When the metronome is on, we can also make it louder or softer. Close the mixer and stop the playback. Next to the metronome is playback settings. Enable MIDI input used to have a button on the toolbar in previous versions. The loop playback, play repeats and pan score automatically also had separate buttons next to the metronome. On the top right we see 4 numbers. The first is the playtime. Next are the bar and beat numbers. The last is the tempo setting. The first 3 numbers would update when a piece is playing. The tempo is single beat at 120 BPM by default when there is no indication in the score. Here it is set to 110. And on the far right are the undo and redo buttons for editing. They're visible when you made changes. In previous versions they're closer to the left. The row of buttons on top look familiar. The first is note input. Click on the little triangle at the corner. The options are basically the same except for the insert added to the menu. The first option, step time, shown with a pencil used to look like the capital letter N. More on note input in a later tutorial. In the middle we see 5 most commonly used accidentals from double flat to double sharp. You also find these symbols in accidentals under palettes on the left. Here you can select a note, and add a sharp or flat quickly. As you add and remove an accidental, you can hear the sound pitch change. Next is tie, shown with 2 notes joined together, and slur with 3 notes together. In previous versions, slur is in the lines menu under palettes. Here it is in articulations. To add a tie or slur between 2 notes, you select the first note and press the button. If you need a tie or slur over many notes, select the first note, hold the shift and the last note. Press the button. You will find that some of the shortcut keys from the previous version, like the letter S for slur, still works. In the center you see 4 common symbols for articulations, including marcato. Like sharps and flats, you can select a note and add it easily. Certain ones can be shown together on a note, such as tenuto and staccato. These are also found in articulations under palettes. Next is the tuplets button for dividing a note into 2 or more shorter notes. You also find this under add on top. The most common is 3, turning a note into triplets. Select a note and set it to triplets. We can divide a note up to 9 using the menu. If we need to divide it any other way, we can use other at the bottom of the menu. The flip button is the same as the previous versions. You can flip a note stem, slur, articulation symbol, etc. upside down or right side up. On the right you see a button with a 1 and another with a 2 next to a note for voice 1 and 2. You can enter notes up to 4 separate voices. The default for entering a note is voice 1. To change a note from voice 1 to 2, select it and click on the 2. You can also change a group of notes to voice 2 easily. More on voices in a later tutorial. Next is the Add button. The drop-down menu is almost identical to Add on top except for Tuplet, which has a separate button on the toolbar. The last button is Customize Toolbar. Here the buttons has an eye next to it that is either open or shut. Scroll to the bottom to see all the buttons you can show or hide. On top of the list are different notes including the very fast ones you wouldn't normally use. Show only the buttons you need and hide the rest. You can select one or more buttons and change the positions using the up or down arrow keys. In between groups of buttons you can add or remove a separator bar. Before we're done, there is something missing in this version. Go back to version 3.x and you'll find it. On the top right is a camera. You can select an area of the screen and save it to a picture file. For the time being, you can do a screen capture and crop the image with a paint or photo editing program. The camera will be available in a later release of Muse Score. At the bottom we see Workspace and it's at default. The screen layout you see is your workspace. It is the same every time you open Muse Score. You can create different workspaces for different scores to make editing easier. Open the menu. When we create a new workspace, a default name is assigned. The 4 options below can be checked or unchecked. Leave them as is and select. We now have 2 on the list, the default and my new workspace. Select my new workspace. Go to Customize Toolbar and remove a few buttons. Switch back to the default workspace and we see the buttons we have before. Change to My Workspace and we see the toolbar with fewer buttons. Next is the concert pitch button with a tuning fork. This is for changing the key of a non-concert pitch instrument like a B-flat clarinet or horn in F to the standard piano key. Click on it and nothing happens. Switch to a piece notated for a B-flat clarinet. In previous versions of Muse Score you see tabs on top for switching between pieces. Here you move the pointer over the Muse Score 4 icon at the bottom to make the switch. Do a playback. Click on the concert pitch button and you notice the key signature changes to the same as a piano and back to the key for a B-flat clarinet. Switch back to the other piece. Next is page view. Here you see 2 other options. You can display the piece as continuous horizontal or vertical without the page breaks. At the bottom right are the familiar zoom settings that used to be on the toolbar on top. We've come to the end of the intro video. When you close the piece, you have the choice of saving it in the new format. Once it is resaved, you can no longer open it in an earlier version of the program. Muse Score 4 has new features added such as instrument plugins that are not available in earlier versions. Some of the functions have a button on the toolbar for quick access. And, some menus changed positions and menu items moved to different places. Otherwise the ways you input notes are mostly the same as before, that you don't need to relearn everything from scratch. Unfortunately the camera button for screen capture is not available in this version. Hope you enjoyed the presentation and thank you for watching.